Hello there, welcome back to the channel. Time for another update on the Predator and just the fuel system in general. Just gonna update you guys what's been going on. This thing's looking sick, but no time for short talk. Let me get this camera flipped around and I'll show you guys what I've been working on. Kablamo! Look at that, boys. That Predator is mounted. Belt's nice and tight. Shoof. So what I ended up doing in the last video, or the video before that, I can't remember, we were talking about mounting it over here because there's a lack of room over here once you had a lower radiator hose in, stuff like that. Which I'm going to do a little foreshadowing. In the future that won't be an issue, but so we decided over here on the last video. So I was initially, there's a bracket back here that's like a support bracket that bolts up to here, 2 bolts to your power steering pump, and then 1 back to your block right there. And I initially was trying to come straight off of it like this with like a T-style bracket, but then I was kind of looking and that was going to kind of be a pain and just wasn't really going to work how I wanted it to, especially with the power steering pulley and making sure there's a lot of clearance, which I got my nice painted pulley all dirty, but that'll clean up easy. So I got to thinking, I was like, heck, why don't I use these 2 bolts? They're back here behind the pulley for the power steering pump. I was like, I think I come off that. So I did. Got some, I believe it's 1/4 inch plate, or strap, I guess, not really plate. 1/4 inch strap, bent a bracket, got the pump down here. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. It's kind of hard to explain it other than layman's terms of I bent a bracket and bolted it up. Definitely took a lot longer than that. This thing came, I ended up actually pulling this pulley off just so I can mark the holes behind it nice and easy. Pulled that off, marked my holes, drilled everything, bent the bracket, got that all good to where I wanted the pulley, or I wanted the pump itself. So once I did that, come up here, and it's kind of hard to see with the shadow, but you can see it's slotted so I can adjust it. And then, so what the pump is actually bolted to is actually part of the power driven diesel bracket for the Predator. I ended up cutting it up because I don't know if you guys remember in the one video, this bracket came, it had a long piece right here, which I don't know. Oh, let's go over here. This guy bolts to your oil pan with these 2 spacers on your Cummins. And I don't have the other bracket unboxed for the boss's truck because he's going to be running a Predator as well. His is still in the bag, but as you can see how wide that is, it starts here, over here, and you can kind of see where the shape of it is there. So I ended up cutting this here off, cutting it right here, and only use the part that the pump actually bolts to. And that's what this is here. You can see I cut the ears off. One ear came up this way, and then one ear was on the bottom. And as you can kind of see, I kind of trimmed the bracket so as I adjusted it, it would give me plenty of room with the steering box, which, I mean, there's not a whole lot of room, but it doesn't move and the steering box don't move. so I was able to get it fairly close. So then drilled and tapped and put a plate right here on the side, mounted it to this. So then I drilled and tapped this, the plate I bolted on, and used one of the bolts that was provided with the power driven diesel kit. This is actually a bolt you would use to bolt this hub to the front of a Cummins, which are these fine thread guys, and I figured that would be a perfect bolt to tap this. Being fine thread, it would have more thread engagement in this thinner plate, being the fine thread. And then I actually notched, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a notch right here, so that when I tighten this down with these just kind of hand tight to make sure it's level, I notched it so it'll kind of pull it this way and keep your belt straight. Because if it was just flat, it would kind of try and twist this and it would kind of cock the pulley off to the side. So I notched that so it'll pull it towards the front, because it naturally, because it has the belt pulling on the front, it wants to, so it's supposed to be like this, but with the belt it naturally wants to pull the front and kick the back out, because it has this force acting in the front and nothing in the back. So that's why I put the notch in it, so it'll tighten it and pull the back towards the engine, so it'll keep it straighter. I know that was a whole lot of words to say. I just notched that to pull this straight, but that took a lot of trial and error to figure that out. I initially was thinking, oh, I can just stick a pry bar in there, but that I ended up using, I don't have it over here anymore, but I have a long straight edge, 24 inches long, that you're usually using for checking level on like a deck or a head surface. That's what I bought it for, but I actually used it pulley to pulley. It's a perfect machined straight edge within like 1/10,000th of an inch. So I used that to mount these and make sure they were perfectly level, and that's what I used to get this notch right here just right, to make sure these pulleys were nice and straight and I wouldn't be fighting kicking this belt off at higher RPM. So like I said, I had this bracket off and this bracket off, I swear to you, 20 times. Just getting it just right and making sure this is also level this way, like front to back with this, because if I made this like level with the ground, it doesn't match the pitch of the engine leaning back, especially right now because I have the front of the truck on jack stands. So I had to match this level with this level to make it all work. So I had it off a whole mess of times. Finally got it right. And so I got the angle right, got the level right, the pitch with the engine. So then once I did that, made sure the depth was right, all that. So literally 2 days of working on it afterward, just getting this all dialed in. And then once I did that, I noticed if I could like squeeze the belt like this, and the bracket would kind of deflect. So I ended up gusseting both sides. I had to trim this gusset a little short just to clear my power steering pump as well as my plate, but there's plenty of room to get the belt on and off and all that stuff, so it's plenty serviceable. The only part that does suck about the serpentine belt now is I have to take the fuel pump belt off to get the serpentine belt off, but it's a brand new belt, so I shouldn't have to take it off that much. So this thing is on, done, plenty of room here. I could even run a straight fitting under it if I wanted to, but the 90 is just what was supplied with the injection pump and everything. I just put it on there for testing to make sure I could fit a 90 on there if I wanted to, or how the fueling was going to look like. So I'm super excited with how the Predator turned out, but it is fully on there, wham bam, ready to fuel this thing to smithereens, ready to supply that classic diesel design injection pump with all the fuels and all the pressures and all the fuel pressures. But Now that I got the Predator on and I removed the FAS, I had to figure out fuel filters. So I actually got this idea kind of from Todd at Power Driven. I had watched a couple of his videos of startups on the Godfather and stuff, and you could see they had the fuel filters mounted in the front of the truck. So I was like, that honestly would be a good idea, because there's a lot of empty space right here in front of the frame horns. So what I did was set the core support on here, just kind of loosely set it on there where it would be, made sure I had plenty of clearance right here, and then I just took a piece of angle iron. As you can see, I actually drilled and tapped through this brace and the cross member and used these M10 bolts, bolted this to it so I wasn't trying to fight a nut. That's one of my favorite things to do, is drill and tap a lot. It just makes things a lot more serviceable and easy, because you're not dealing with the nut and the bolt. You can just rip some bolts out, take it off. So I put that angle on here, got it centered, measured it out, and I had these 2 filter bases from back in the day on my OG fuel system for this truck that actually had a Holly blue electric fuel pump, and these 2 filter bases for filters. So I repurposed those for this up front here. I actually bought them off eBay, 7 years ago probably. They fit cat filters, it's a really basic thread pitch, which they actually fit fast filters. I just use these for mock-up. They were spares that I had for my fast. Well, this is a new one and this is a used one, again, just for mock-up. But it's just a 1/2-inch pipe right here, and I have a lot of these push lock fittings from doing fast setups and stuff like that. So I just need to run down to the store, order them up from Vibrant, get some 1/2-inch pipe, 2-8. I need 3 of those, actually 4. I need 4 of those so I can run from the tank all the way up here to the filters to this one, because it'll run down this frame rail into this. Out of here it'll loop around like this into this one, and then this will loop to the pump. Boom. And then on the pump you'll also have your I don't have it right here in my very close vicinity, but you have to put a check valve so the mechanical pump will keep prime, because obviously the pump doesn't move unless your engine's moving. So it's not like a FAS or any electric pump where you can turn the key or hit a switch and it'll prime itself. So you have to put a check valve, and that'll help your pump keep prime, make it easy to start. You're not fighting the dadgum thing for 15 minutes every time you start it. So from tank into the filter, this over to here. And the only reason I'm not doing it from here to here is it's too short with that big a hose, and you start adding, you got to think a fitting is going to be out probably that far to there, and then you do the same thing for here, and with the 1/2-inch hose it would be this much, and it would just be kinked by the time you tried to do that. And I would rather have an extra couple inches of hose just to loop around and have a nice free-flowing setup. So into here from the tank, from here to here, this one to the pump up to regulator, which that'll be the next thing to mount, is the regulator from Classic Diesel Designs for the injection pump, which I can just kind of set that up in here like I talked about in the last video. Set it up here, see where I'll have room to mount the regulator, and then from regulator to that bad boy. But I'm really stoked. It's definitely a different position to mount the filters. I've only seen one other truck that has them mounted up here, and that was Todd at Power Driven on the Godfather. But I figured for ease of maintenance, be right here, ease of priming, because it'll be right here. I could even probably put, kind of like on a Duramax, they have that big Schrader valve. I could drill and tap this. I've seen a lot of guys do it for like a pressure gauge, but I could do it there and put a Schrader valve on it and put pressure to the system close here to the pump. and I could even put my gauge here, but the regulator actually has that port there is for a gauge. So I'm going to be running it off that. It'll be a shorter hose, which I have been doing some research, and I'm going to run a Holley EFI fuel pressure gauge because that's the only one I could find that'll go up to 150 psi like I need. I'll only go up to 125, but I definitely don't want to max the gauge out because then if it spikes a little bit I won't be able to tell. So that's why I wanted a 150 psi gauge, and Holley EFI has one that goes 0 to 150. It is a mechanical gauge, so it will have fuel plumb to it, which I'm kind of bummed about, but basically any gauge I found that high is going to be electric, unless you guys know of another fuel pressure gauge that's digital with an electric sensor that will read from 0 to 150. Let me know in the comments. I would definitely be interested in that. But the Holley mechanical analog gauge, whatever you want to call it, is only like $40. So if you can find an electric one, that's even, I'd even pay $80 just to have the electric one and not have to worry about fuel line to the gauge bursting and all that kind of stuff. They just make a mess, and they are more accurate. I just don't want to deal with the extra plumbing and extra mess if there's a hose that leaks or bursts or splits, especially at the high pressure I'm going to be at. But like I said, if you know of an electric one, let me know. But other than that, the fuel system is all mounted up besides that regulator. Just got to find a spot for it, and then hypothetically once this thing has fuel to it, it would start. I would just have to loop my oil lines for the turbo because I do not have one yet. If any of you want to donate an S475 to the cause, let me know. But I could loop those oil lines, plumb this fuel system, and this sunbuck would start. But I'm really not in that big of a rush. Our track just had their final race of the year, so if and when I do get this running, if it's this year, it'll just be playing around out on the street in front of the shop. But now I'm not too worried about hustling and getting it done. I'm really not in that much of a rush now because there's not any races here locally anymore, which is fine by me. It'll give me more time to just get everything dialed in, make sure everything's routed perfectly the way I wanted, tied up the way I wanted, just make it nice, and just make sure it's all ready for next year. But it's going to be one slick unit. The fuel system has finally got the Predator mounted. That was huge, and I love how it turned out. And then the fuel filters, got those mounted. Love how that turned out as well. Just need to get a couple fittings and I could plumb all of it. Even the regulator, I could plumb it. I just need to figure out where to mount it. But I figured out update you guys on how that came along. This thing has a fuel pump, has an injection pump, has fuel filters, a fuel cell. Literally just need to mount a regulator and this thing's fully plumbed. And I'm super excited about it. So, like I said, comment, guys, if you know of a nice electrical fuel pressure gauge that'll read up to 150 psi. Let me know. Let me know what you think about how the Predator turned out, how I did the tensioner, all that good stuff. But stay tuned for the next video, guys. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff, and I will catch you on the next one, guys. Thanks.